Good morning. This is Jonathan with Payroll Services. I wanted to go over the new overtime changes. We've been getting a lot of follow-up questions to our newsletters that we've been putting out about this big change. And don't kid yourself, this is a very, very big change. From an administrative standpoint, you may think, okay, yep, we can deal with this, but this is going to have big effects on your employees and how they view it, because they won't understand this. So to start off with, these changes are effective December 1st, 2016. They were due to the Department of Labor working with President Obama to change the overtime threshold. What they viewed was certain industries were abusing their employees and having them work 50, 60 hours and not paying them overtime, and using the salary exemption rule as the catalyst to not pay them. So let's see what happens with all of this here. So the new threshold of what they decided was $47,476 to be salary exempt. Now, this is not demographic specific, so it doesn't mean that if you're in Georgia, that amount changes. This is across the nation. So that in itself is a really big change, because if you are in DC, 47,000 is nothing. If you're in Georgia, if you're in Kentucky, if you're in Alabama, $47,000 is a completely different amount of money. And so that's the biggest hurdle when we have a lot of multi-state employers, that this needs to be considered inside your business model. Now, what I want to make sure of that I'm clear on this is, just because you pay your staff over the $47,476 threshold, it does not automatically mean that they are exempt from overtime. You still need to make sure that your salaried worker is exempt via the job testing. This information can be found on the Department of Labor's website. There's all sorts of different rules that you need to go through to ensure that your staff is actually exempt. If you have any questions about that, you can go ahead and contact our office, or like I said, you can check the Department of Labor site. Now, first off, we need to establish some basic rules here. Overtime is typically 1.5 times the employee's hourly rate for any hours worked over a 40-hour period in a work week. And we're going to define what a work week is in a little bit later. But again, it's 1.5 times their hourly rate for any type of hours worked over 40 hours in a work week. This does not mean a pay period. And this will make more of a difference when we start talking about semi-monthly pay periods. So first, what is a work week? This is important to define because most employers actually don't understand this. And usually they get by it by default because they're either weekly or they're bi-weekly. But where the work week really makes a difference is for you semi-monthly pay periods. The semi-monthly pay periods, we usually pay on the 15th and the 31st, or maybe the 1st and the 20th. They pay twice a month, not every other week. A work week is a reoccurring period of time that's 168 hours in a 7-day consecutive period of time. So for example, Sunday through Saturday is 7 days, 24-hour periods. That's 168 hours. And that's what you need to consider with it. So when you're going through, it's 7 consecutive 24-hour periods, which equals 168 hours. Let's go to our next slide here. So how do we take the work week in relationship to the pay periods? Well, for weekly's real easy, guys. Most of you guys already have it. You know, if you start your pay period on a Sunday, it's going to go Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 7 days. Pretty simple, okay? Everybody kind of understands that. Now, I want to stress, though, you don't have to go to like a Sunday through a Saturday. You could do a Wednesday to Tuesday. You could do Friday through Thursday. It doesn't matter as long as it's 7 days consecutively. Bi-weekly, if you guys want to follow along too, pull up your little calendar in the bottom of your screen. This will help you out as we start getting deeper into the semi-monthly information. Bi-weekly, it's simple, just like weekly, but you're going to do it in 7 days, but bi-weekly usually stacks it into 14 periods of time. But I want to be clear with this. So let's say I worked 38 hours in the first week and I'm bi-weekly, and then I worked 42 hours in the second week. Well, that total hours is 80. I still worked 2 hours of overtime in that second work week. So the way that it should be reported is it should be 38 hours plus 40 hours equals 78 hours of regular pay plus 2 hours of overtime. So again, guys, you can't just say, hey, I have 14 days in my work week and he worked 80 hours, we're good. No, if he doesn't work any hours in the first work week and he works a straight 80 hours in the second work week, that 40 extra hours is all overtime. And this is important because although you're going to see a lot of updates that are coming out in 2017 that are targeting this. Government views that businesses are taking advantage of people, whether it's through ignorance or deliberate. And we're seeing a lot more Department of Labor audits coming out targeting these things, especially if you're in Montgomery County, Prince George's County, inside Maryland, or any of the other states that have individual county or city laws. They're starting to nail people on these things, and you'll start seeing some different updates that we're rolling out to try to assist you even more with these. But you need to understand that you cannot just willy-nilly get by with these things. We've seen at least 6 different companies get penalized because of overtime laws. Now, where this gets a little bit confusing is when we go to semi-monthly. And in order to understand this, you do need to be looking at a calendar if you can't see this picture. I apologize. I tried blowing it up as big as possible for this presentation. So, for example, most people pay on the 15th and the last day of the month, whether that's 30th or the 31st. And that's what I have highlighted here in my red squares, okay? My red squares indicate the pay dates. Now, the problem is the pay dates are typically never 2 weeks. Why? Because the 15th and the 30th fluctuate. They never fall on the same day. So that's why it's important to make sure you establish your work week as well as your pay period starts and ends. Now, this is where it's going to get a little complicated, guys, and I want you to take a look at your calendars. We're going to look at the pay period, the pay date, November 30th. And I'm going to give you an example of how payroll services would pay their semi-monthly employees. Our pay period start date would start on November 9th, and it would end on November 23rd. And that, again, would be for the pay date November 30th. The problem is if we look at the calendar, we see that November 9th starts on a Wednesday, and it goes all the way through another complete week and then finishes up on the 23rd, which happens to be a Wednesday. But if we were to look at this on the next month, that would not happen. It may start on a Thursday and end on a Tuesday. So we have to take our work week and apply it to this schedule. We are going to use a basic work week of Sunday through Saturday. So if we take a look at this, if for the pay date of November 30th, my pay period starts on November 9th. Well, the work week, though, would start on November 6th, which is a Sunday. So when you look at this, you can see Sunday, November 6th, Monday, November 7th, and Tuesday, November 8th, all fall on the previous pay period, but in the same work week. So this is where it gets complicated for overtime, because most employers would say, no, he didn't work overtime in that pay period, but you're using the wrong definitions. It must be in the work week. This presents a unique challenge to semi-monthly pay period clients. And with this, you absolutely need to be having a timekeeping system, because there's no way that you're going to be able to keep track of this in your head. What we actually recommend for new businesses that start up is always to do either bi-weekly or weekly, because semi-monthly creates this unique set of complications. With this, again, if you take a look at the calendar, we need to take a work week and fit it within a pay period. And this example here shows the challenges here. Now, to make this a little bit clearer, I want to take a look at the dates November 20th to Wednesday, November 23rd, which is the last days in that pay period for November 30th check date. you will see that if my work week starts on Sunday and ends on Saturday, that inside this pay period, I am 4 days in. So for example, if I worked 10 hours on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, that's 40 hours of regular time. My pay period ends. However, the work week is still going. So if I work any hours, the 24th, the 25th, or the 26th, they would be subject to overtime. And this is how clients are getting penalized. You do need to understand how this is working. And to be honest, if you look at this and go, wow, this is way too complicated, I highly recommend you considering switching to biweekly. It's much more simpler and things kind of lay out a lot smoother. However, it can be done as long as you're utilizing a timekeeping system for this. The overtime rule has nothing to do with the work week or the pay periods and how they relate to each other. These are normal laws that you should be abiding by already. So the next thing we need to talk about with this overtime rule is the danger of docking time or unpaid time off. So for example, right now, you may have an employee that used up all their paid time off, and maybe you don't like the employee. Maybe they're not a good employee. Maybe you just have a policy that says, once you hit 0, you can never go negative and your pay is going to be reduced. The problem with this is that all salaried exempt employees must make a reoccurring $47,476. But this is based per week. So if for some reason, one pay period or work week, you decide that, hey, this guy only worked 2 days this week and I'm only going to pay him for the 2 days, now he's dipped below that threshold and you are at risk of him losing that exemption for the overtime. This would then mean you would be subject to going back through all of their hours worked and having to pay him overtime. This is kind of the gotcha that they're not telling you about. So it's really important that you understand this and be prepared on how to deal with it from an HR standpoint. You do need to get with your HR team, whether that's just simply you, whether it's your office manager, the owner, whoever. But you have to understand that this limit here is that if you ever dip below that weekly limit of $47,476 divided by 52, which is the number of weeks in a year. If you dip below that amount, you risk being penalized and that employee losing their exemptions. So it's a unique set of rules that you're going to need to take under consideration when you look at your staff. So current staff, what do you do? I can't stress enough, guys, how much of an impact this is going to have on your workforce, okay? First, there's a morale issue here. Most salaried employees are not used to punching a clock, okay? You're going to have to start tracking hours. It's a must. Anybody that is under that threshold, you've got to track their hours because now they're subject to overtime. If they work 40 hours and 25 minutes, those 25 minutes are subject to overtime, okay? You are going to have to report hours to us now for these salaried non-exempt employees. And so what we'll do is in our system, let's say you pay somebody $1,000 a week or whatever the number is. If you report 38 hours, we will now give that employee pay based off of 38 hours. So employees are going to be paid for actual time worked. The other thing that you need to consider is, do you bump their wages so that way you can continue the exemption? Again, you still need to worry about their salaries dipping and unpaid time off and things like that, but it may be something easier. If you have employees that are right below it, maybe they're at 45 or 46, maybe you want to give them that extra raise just so you don't have to deal with this. However, these are considerations that you need to be thinking about. And we also let you guys know about this several months ago. This isn't something that is a surprise. This is something that's been reoccurring that we've been reminding you guys about. Now you got to do something. If you haven't decided, you need to decide within the next week or two. Things to think about. The morale, guys, I'm going to repeat it again. Salaried employees are not used to punching a clock, okay? The flexibility now is limited. For example, you may have a salaried employee that comes in 15 minutes late and they leave on time. Well, now, essentially, they're not going to get paid for those 15 minutes. You are going to have to be Scrooged with this, not because necessarily you want to, but you will be penalized as an employer. The flexibility will be limited. And here's a great example. Most employers would say, you know what, it's okay if you need to come in 2 hours late. It's not a big deal. Just make it up. Well, let's take this example. Let's say one of my staff members, my work week is Sunday through Saturday. One of my staff members needs to come in 3 hours late on Friday, and they want to make it up on Monday. They're going to stay 3 hours later, okay? The problem is now is in my first work week, they've only clocked 37 hours. But in the second work week, they've clocked 43. Well, those 3 hours are now subject to overtime. That was a flexibility thing that we tried to give people. That flexibility is gone now. You cannot allow that. You will end up getting penalized or having to pay overtime with it. So these are things to think about. Flexibility is almost non-existent with this. Employees aren't going to understand this change. You need to meet with your staff and explain to them what's going on. Some of your employees are going to view this as a potential downgrade, because if they're making $45,000 right now, they're not worried about, their pay being $100 less on a pay period. But now it could be if they don't clock the time. If they come in and don't work, let's say they work, 38 hours instead of 40. Well, they're docked 2 hours of time. It is what it is. Pay stubs are also going to show hourly rates and hours worked. Again, this is a big change to employees. They're going to see it, and if you don't talk to them about it, they're going to be like, what the heck? You're going to have so many employees at your door that it's going to tie you up. You need to meet with your staff members, and you need to understand what's going on with these rules and how it's going to impact your company. Docking time from salaried employees may penalize you, okay? I want to stress this. This is a big issue, especially if you have somebody that is not necessarily the best employee in the world, or maybe they're new and they're on probation, and, something happens where they're out a week. Well, if you dock their time and they don't have any PTO, they're falling under that threshold, and now they could be subject to being non-exempt now. These are things that you have to think about on how to deal with. I can't stress this enough. Every single person, I don't care if you have everybody exempt from overtime or not exempt, you need to get a timekeeping system in place immediately. Montgomery County, PG County, all these different counties are starting to pass laws that are based off of hours worked. It doesn't matter if they're hourly employees, salaried employees, or anything. You need to get your timekeeping system in place immediately. They're not that expensive to do. We offer them. They integrate directly with our payroll system. You really need to go into that. Again, this is an overview. This should give you all of the items that you need to think about and how it's going to relate to your staff. I can't stress you need to have a staff meeting and explain these rollouts. If you have a lot of people that are like $42,000, $44,000, $43,000, because they're all going to become hourly employees now. You need to make sure that they understand this, and they also need to make sure that they understand you're not the bad guy with this one. Because if you don't communicate, they're going to immediately think that Mr. Employer, the rich guy that's just sitting on his duff, is just trying to dock pay. You need to make sure that they understand it and that you communicate appropriately. I want to thank you for tuning into this. If you have any questions, or if you know somebody that's, that this could be blindsided, have them call us. We'd love to help them. Payroll's becoming so complicated now. Even payroll companies like ourselves are doing more and more and more training above and beyond what you would typically think is normal because of these complicated issues that are arising. Again, if you have any questions, you can visit us at www.payrollservicesllc.com or call us at 1-888-WAY, the number 2, PAY. Thank you very much.